If you've been tired of AAA games like me in the last few years, you're definitely not alone. Views on AAA have shifted towards being a lot more hostile, and honestly I think a lot of the criticism is deserved. But in this video I want to talk a little about a side effect of this shift that affects far more than just big studios. Unfinished, unoptimized games, apology.png, microtransactions, 30 different editions that all feature different add-ons and you need a spreadsheet to understand what you're actually buying. These are all things more and more people associate with AAA. For a lot of people, AAA became more of a be aware sign than a seal of quality it tries to be. And the studios, or more accurately the investors, have done a great job at cultivating that exact image. You can see this shift reflected in the entire industry. Most of the games that dominated the internet discussion or awards in the last years have been indie hits like Among Us, It Takes Two, Fall Guys, Peak, just to name a few. Platforms like Steam increasingly surface and reward smaller titles instead of AAA. The business side tells the same story. Mass layoffs, studios closing, scandals about toxic work environments, and an extremely volatile stock suggest that the AAA space is under real pressure, and much of it is self-inflicted. When companies repeatedly prioritize short-term financial goals over long-term development, the results are hard to ignore. So the obvious question is, why should we care? And this is where I want to play devil's advocate for a moment, because beyond player frustration and bad launches, there's a side effect of this shift that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. Every indie game relies on a lot of technology to make it work. This is not a criticism. Especially when you work alone or in a small team, it's perfectly reasonable to take every shortcut you can take. And no, I'm not talking about AI. For example, all of the recent indie games use a video game engine. For everybody who doesn't know it, a video game engine is a piece of software that makes everything, the scripts, the animation, the sounds, the models, the input system, etc. work together. Of course, you can make your own engine from scratch, but that takes a lot of knowledge and time. Or you can use pre-made engines like Unity, Unreal, GameMaker or Godot. Whatever indie game you have played, all of them were created in one of those engines. And here lies the problem. The developers behind these engines are making money from active developers. Indie developers often only need one active license to make the game, or sometimes even none. The engine developers are making their money from huge AAA companies that sometimes have thousands of active licenses. Indie developers only benefit indirectly. The same pattern is true with nearly every commercial software for texture creation, 3D scans, modeling, texturing, music, sounds, etc. And even if we are not looking at the cost to develop the tools, we need to think about innovations that are happening constantly because big studios keep investing in them. Just in the last few years, we now have dynamic asset streaming for huge worlds, or technology to put 3D scans directly into game engines and then actually performing fairly well, or real-time global illumination. What I'm saying is that these technologies were developed from or for AAA, but even a lot of indie devs use them now to make their games reality. Indies weren't the focus for all of those tools and technologies. They are not the target audience, they are the side effect on how this industry works. All of these tools couldn't sustain in an indie-only world. This is probably the thing you've been thinking about for the last few minutes. Why not rely entirely on open source software? And for most people, Blender comes to mind. To be clear, this will not be an attack on Blender, it's an excellent tool. But when you look at Blender's development history, it becomes clear that this kind of success is the exception, not a universally repeatable model for complex software. There was a notable shift around Blender during the 3.0 era. It became a lot more mature. So what changed? Serious funding entered the picture. With the development of version 3.0, Blender gained a lot of new funds. Increased financial support allowed the project to hire more full-time developers, improve stability and iterate faster, which directly translated into wider professional adoption. And if you look at the list of companies that are funding Blender right now, we can see that it's mostly big companies. Indie developers that give sporadic donations here and there will probably not even make a dent in the overhead. Again, this is not a criticism, this is simply how complex tools like Blender survive. Even today, Blender rarely gets to lead large speculative technological developments. It's an excellent fast follower, but it doesn't have the budget to burn money on risky R&D that might never pay off. Its development has to focus on proven, immediately valuable work just to stay competitive. And that's the core point. Open source doesn't remove the need for money, it's just a little more obfuscated where it comes from. Volunteers help, but you still require people whose full-time job is to design, maintain and evolve the underlying technology. Open source relies heavily on large funding sources, and a world made up entirely of indie developers wouldn't generate this capital at scale. So what's the takeaway here? I'm not saying you should defend AAA studios, and I'm definitely not saying you should support them unconditionally. What I am saying is that blindly boycotting everything is not a long-term solution, because a huge part of the technology and tools the entire industry relies on are being funded by those same companies, and this probably will not change in the near future. So the only reasonable position left is to choose wisely. Don't buy into marketing hype, don't pre-order, wait for reviews, and when a game launches unfinished or predatory, don't support it. Because money is the only signal companies actually listen to. But the flip side of that is just as important. When a big studio actually delivers a solid, complete product, supporting that matters too, because that's how companies can identify what they should do in the future. You are voting with your wallet, so always think about what you're signaling when you buy something. So the real question is, what kind of industry are you voting for? Thanks for watching.